Welcome back to the Holosky Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Steven.
And Kyle.
And happy Monday, Holo Cult. Hope everybody is doing well and getting this week kicked off correct. We got something different. Got an interview with our new friend, Erick Szilagyi from the uNcomfortable podcast. He's going to tell us about his whole life of weirdness, what led him into the paranormal pod world, and he might have some connections to some old friends of ours. So should be a banger, Holo Cult. Before we do that, I'm going to get through all of our business. So check us out at all social medias, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, and be sure to come over and hang out at the Discord, bang in place. If you have a paranormal experience you'd like to share for a future show, Kyle's got some information, and it's also in the show notes.
You can call or text the holophone, which is going to be 1-618-556-0837. You can write your story out or record it on your voice memo apps or however you want to do it. Shoot that over to the email, which is going to be holoskypodcast@gmail.com. If you want to schedule some interviews, you can send that over to holoskyinterviews@gmail.com. Other than that, content creators, just get a hold of us. We'll set something up.
Word. We're just going to get right into it today. Skip all the normal stuff, and we're going to throw it right to Erick. So let everybody know where they can find your show and just hop into it.
Hey, Steve. Hey, Kyle. Man, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
I'm stoked. For this.
Same, dude. Same.
I've been looking forward to this all week. So, uNcomfortable podcast. You can get it on. You can hear it anywhere you hear Holosky or any of the other big shows. Spotify, Apple. Caster, cast those, cast this, cast that, cast everything, cast it this way, cast it that way. It's on all of them. Just coming up on about 2 years. February 14th will be my 2-year anniversary. Just over 100 shows, and man, I'm loving life right now. This is awesome. What a banger way to do an extra job, man. Doing what you love. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I've been into it my entire life. I mean, honestly, I was absolutely obsessed with UFOs at the age of 5. And it's like, how do you know it was 5? And it's like, well, I've got something that I can prove that it was 5 because in 1970, I'm 57 years old. In 1970, there was a documentary released to the theaters that was called, it was by Eric Van Doniken's Chariots of the Gods. It was a book that he had written, and they turned it into a pseudo documentary movie. And that came out in 1970. I was born in 65. I begged and pleaded with my parents to take me to see that damn movie, and they wouldn't do it. So one day when my grandma was babysitting me, I convinced her to take me to see it. And she ended up falling asleep in the seat beside me as I'm watching this show about these crop circles and the Nazca lines and all this stuff. And I can remember looking over at her and being like, how can you be sleeping through this? This stuff is great. But it started off with, being crazy about UFOs at 5 years old. Probably about 7 is when I started getting into the Bigfoot. Loch Ness Monster was a big thing for me back then. The Bermuda Triangle was huge. And, just as the years have gone by, none of it left me. I kind of got over the Bermuda Triangle. It's still weird, but there's been some pretty good explanations as far as what they think is happening, as far as the boats anyway. It doesn't really explain the missing planes. But, there's supposedly some kind of a gas release that happens in that area of the Bermuda Triangle that releases a bunch of real small bubbles rather than big bubbles. And then it can end up capsizing the boat and stuff like that. It makes a lot of sense. And they've recreated it in big tanks. So I kind of buy into that. Bigfoot for me is still a huge one. I am firmly rooted in the belief that these things are in existence and that they are way more in way more places than what people just think. It's not just the Pacific Northwest. It's not just in the mountains, the Yeti up in the Tibetan mountains. They're everywhere. Literally, like every country has them. So Bigfoot's a big thing for me. UFOs, I mean, they've come out and admitted it now. So, only took them 70 years from, first admitting it to recanting the story to, now again, there's something in our skies that we don't know what the hell it is. So I thought it was really kind of strange that they decided to do that soft disclosure right during the peak of the pandemic. What a
strategic timing.
Absolutely. What a way to let something get out that was overshadowed by something way bigger at the time. Absolutely. So, it's something that's never left me. When I was married, I'm sure my ex-wife probably got annoyed with everything that I watched on TV was either Ancient Aliens or a Bigfoot show or a documentary or something on Amazon, a ghost hunting show. All of it is just so intriguing to me. And, my parents never really were the kind that would shut it down. They were never like, you got to stop listening to this crap. It's, rotting your brain and none of it's real. They never did that. They weren't necessarily, oh yeah, you should go investigate that. They didn't really do that either, but they allowed me to have to maintain an open mind. And I think, to be honest with you, I think a lot of people that grow up in a household where they're kind of shut down when it comes to talking about that kind of stuff, I think that really affects people, how they progress, how they move forward in life as they get older. I think they shut themselves down to those things. And, these people that you talk to, that's like, I've never had anything happen. Well, I bet you have. I just bet that you've had something happen and you were immediately jumping to, there was some other explanation for it.
Yep. Just wrote it off as coincidence or.
Yeah. And it gets me when, you get these people who are all high and mighty and they start talking about using Occam's razor. Well, if Occam's razor, it would certainly say that, it wouldn't be that. But if you have an experience like I've had in my life, then Occam's razor tells you that it's exactly that. What you experience is what you experience, and not to look for a different explanation for it. Start to look into what that explanation might be or why it happened, but not to discount it and replace it with something that makes more sense just because your brain is having a hard time wrapping it around it. So, that's kind of where I'm at. If I go out in the woods and I hear something, not every fart in the wind is Bigfoot. It's not. Every time you look up in the sky and you see a light moving across it, it's not always a UFO. Sometimes a chair is just a chair, right? Unless you sit in it and it quacks like a duck, then maybe it's not a chair.
Got to start asking questions.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what you're pointing out is an amazing point, because a lot of people, we've been accused of it. A lot of people will like to sit and say, well, you guys buy into everything. You buy into everything. You buy into everything. It's like, well, no, not necessarily. Well, because we're kind of like you, I mean, don't get me wrong. I am guilty. I love the idea. Like you brought up Occam's razor. My initial thought when you said that, I go, where's the fun in that?
Yeah.
Right. So I am guilty of those things to a degree, but I also, I respect what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, because it is important to sit back once in a while and try to go, okay, like you said, why did this happen? Could it have been a car coming down the road and I just, thought it was in the air instead of this, that, and the other? I think it is very, very important. And a lot of people oversee that detail because of the topics that we choose to talk about.
Sure. And I'll take it a step further. And I've got a friend of mine, you guys are aware of her. She'll she'll vouch for me when I say this. We've all put ourselves into a position where we talk about this stuff a lot. We entertain this stuff a lot. We immerse ourselves in the subtleties of some of these things that are strange. And after a while, it's going to be easy for a listener to say, oh, well, you just get used to it and then you automatically just jump to that. I get that. And I don't discount it. But the more that you remain open and you put yourself in a position of being around people who have experiences, being around people and talking to people, even if it's over a Zoom call, who have attachments and things like that are going on, you cannot help but become more aware of things that are going on. Steve used the words synchronicities before we started recording. And yeah, coincidences left the building freaking years ago. Synchronicity is a word that's getting overused so badly that I really wish there was another word to use, but that is what, synchronicity sums it up. I'm sure you guys have known, just like I do, throughout the course of the time that I've been doing this, there are threads of weirdness that weave themselves out of one episode and weave themselves back into an episode that is completely unrelated. The guests don't know who the hell each other are. The topics may not even be the same for the most of it, but these weird little tendrils that seem to seep out of the episode, and sometimes they snake around a different episode and they might weave in between one or two, but man, you get to episode 4 and it's right back smack dab right in the middle of, and you're thinking to yourself, it's like, man, what the hell's going on? How are we talking about the same exact thing, only this is a completely different conversation? And I think that I honestly do. I think the more, and there's people that will confirm that, when we spend as much time as we do talking about the things that we do and to the people that have these things happening to them, we cannot help but be more aware of it. And, I just, maybe I'm complete whack job. I could be completely off my rocker.
No, you put it a good way, being aware of it. That's
and because
a very good way to put it.
That's we've had this conversation with people before where, like you said, a lot of people will think that they don't experience things or see things. And it's like, I'm in agreement with you that, yeah, you do. You most likely do. The thing is that, like you said, once you start to become open to this and you start entertaining these thoughts, you start like constantly focusing your consciousness on this. It may be subtle things. There will be subtle things that pop up in your life where you're like, it'll at least make me question, where I feel crazy some days where I'm like, what are like me and Steve do it all the time. I'll be like, what are the odds that this popped up at this current time of my life, man? Like, please help me explain this to myself, because I can't rationally come up with any conclusion for this.
Yeah.
And I think that no matter how big or small you are, that eventually when you start knocking on doors, somebody's going to answer one of them doors eventually. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
You go looking hard enough, something's going to look back.
100%.
I agree. I really do. I've, I went on the Confessionals a while back, and basically the whole idea was I was supposed to talk about the experiences that I've had throughout my life, and we ended up specifically talking about one episode, and that was episode 5, and that was called Dinner with a Witch. And the just the sheer number of things that happened to me during the 3-hour process of doing that interview with I thought she was a Native American witch. I thought she was going to be shaman or a medicine woman or, something more in lines with a Native American healer. Nope. Come to find out, she is a full blown witch. Like, when you say witch, like broomstick and black cats and that whole thing. And the number of things, she only lived like 35 minutes away from me. So I actually went to her house to do the interview with her.
That's
wow.
So
that is dedication.
Like, I feel like that's like right there in the makings of Skinwalker territory right there. Like tread lightly, my friend.
let me kind of paint the stage for you a little bit.
Let's do this. Let's do this.
So, it's my 5th episode, and I am trying to come up with a really good hook for the name of the episode, right? And I haven't even done the interview yet, and I'm trying to come up with this. I'm like, date night with a witch, dinner with a witch, and so I started having a conversation with my son, and I said, I think this is what I'm going to do. Since she lives so close, I'm going to say, hey, why don't we go out and grab a bite to eat, have a couple of drinks. We can have a little precursor conversation. So you get comfortable with me and we see how good the flow of conversation is. And, everything's good. And then we'll go back and we'll do the show. And my son says, he's like, it's a cool idea, but with the culture today and the whole toxic masculinity thing and people getting canceled for saying stuff, that they said 15 years ago on a comedy stage, he's like, maybe you might want to rethink not really putting it in the context of you're going out on a date. And I was like, shit, you're right. So I'm like, no, all right, I'm going to shit can that idea. So I get out of work on the day of the interview. I go home. I'm on the way home. I stop at McDonald's, get myself something to eat because I'm not going to go out to dinner. I get home, pack up all of my stuff, and I start heading towards this woman's house. Again, like 35 minutes away. I'm backing out of my driveway and my phone goes off. I get a text message and it's her. And she says, hey, have you eaten? And I said, yeah, I have. And she goes, oh, shoot. And I said, if you need to push off like a half hour so you get a chance to get something to eat, no problem. I can hold off. And she goes, no, I was just really hoping we could go out and grab something to eat. And I'm like, what? Seriously? Exactly what I was planning on wanting to do. And now she's saying it. And so I respond to her and I said, listen, if you want to go grab something to eat, I'll go with you. I've already ate, but I'll grab a drink. You can get something to eat and then we'll do the interview. And she goes, great, I'll be ready. Pick me up. So I get to her house and I open up the door and she's standing there and I am hit with this like animalistic, dude. When I'm telling you, like the sexual tension, the sexual desire that I felt when I looked at her, I had never felt like a predator in my life. But when I looked at her, I felt like a bad person. In a sexual sense, I felt like a freaking predator. And it was immediate. She was standing in the doorway. And I was just like, it was bizarre. And, I'm a flag waving confirmed heterosexual, man. I like women. They're beautiful. They're all different shapes and sizes. Man, women are like the best thing that God ever created. But I have never in my life had feelings like I had being around her. And, so she walks out the door. We walk over to my car. I open the car door for her. We get inside. We drive about 15, 20 minutes. We go to this little bar restaurant in a small town right outside where she lived. Had dinner. The bill comes to the table. It's $46 even. There's no cents, no pennies. It's just $46 even. I don't think I ever have had a receipt where there was not some part of change, in the cost of something. And I was like, that's kind of weird. So then we drive back to her house. As we drive back to her house, we go down these couple of curvy roads. She has me pull off to the side by this guardrail. She gets out of the car, and beyond the guardrail is maybe like a 2-track or like some kind of a laneway, maybe I don't know, like for utility vehicles or something going back into these woods. And she says, roll down your window. So I roll down my window. The door is open and she stands out there. She puts her hands up to her mouth and she goes, whoop. And all of a sudden, like 5 or 7 seconds later, way back in the back of the woods, you hear, whoop. You hear a whoop come back. And she looked into the window of the car and she goes, isn't that cool? And I was like, what are you doing? And she goes, that's where my big boy lives. And I was like, your big boy? What do you mean your big boy? And she's like, that's where SETI lives. SETI, SETI. And I was like, you freaking named your Bigfoot? And she goes, yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
she gets back in the car. Awesome. She gets back in the car. We drive to her house and we walk in. I've got my my travel case with all my stuff in it. And I got another bag that's got my microphones and everything in it. We walk in the house and she goes, come on, we'll go upstairs. It'll be nice and quiet up there. So we go up this super narrow hallway going up into the upstairs. I had to turn sideways to carry my shit up the stairs. And we get to this door and hanging on the front of the door is this like painting of, it's either a painting of a dog man or a werewolf. It's hanging on the front of the door. She opens it up. I step inside and it's her bedroom. And I still in my brain, I still got what I was telling you about, from the moment she opened up the door. And I'm like, oh, what's going on here? What's going to happen? And I start looking around the room and there's like, there's dream catchers and there's werewolf paintings and there's, stars and there's pictures of Loki and all these, just everything about, statues of ravens, and just everywhere you looked, it was some kind of imagery that was just not so much that it was dark and scary, but it was like, it really evoked the witch thing, but it also had a really strong element of Native American as well. And so I get everything set up and we sit down and we start recording and like it couldn't have been, 10 or 15 minutes into it. And so where I'm sitting up against the wall, and directly beside me to my left shoulder is the doorknob of the door that we came in. All right. She closed the door after we got into the room and the door was closed. And we're talking, and she's talking about this, that she's got a spirit that's in the house that, crosses through her bedroom almost on a daily basis. And it's of an elderly African-American woman who used to live in the house before they had moved in. And it's her ghost. And she's just kind of like passing through like on a regular basis. And as she's talking about this, I see, and she tells me that before we get there, while we're eating dinner, she's like, my brother lives with me. He's handicapped. So, he won't bother us at all or anything, but, just be aware he lives there. So we're sitting there and I see this hand and pretty much most of the forearm, kind of reach in through the doorway and just kind of wave, but the hand's like waving at her. And I'm looking at her. So I'm seeing this arm out of my left peripheral vision. And she doesn't react to it at all. And I just assumed like it was her brother sticking his hand in there going like, hey, I'm here. I'm not going to bother you, but just letting you know I'm here. And later I looked over and that door is closed. That door, if the door would have opened, it would have opened right beside my shoulder. So that part would have swung open past, I would have seen it in my peripheral. I was less than, 18 inches away from it. And she's talking about this ghost that walks through all the time. And I was like, did I just freaking see a ghost arm reach through a freaking closed door and wait? And it waved at her. It wasn't waving at me. And I was like, well, that was freaking weird, So we start talking about her family heritage is, amazing because, like on her dad's side of the family, I believe it was, they can trace back to Chief Cornstalk, who, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And, he was married to Pocahontas's sister and the whole Mothman curse and all that stuff. And on mom's side, they could track her descendants all the way back into Europe as being part of the Druids, which, Jesus, I mean, I'm lucky if I can go back, 100 years to know who I was related to.
Same.
So, there was a super really interesting conversation about her history and her background and, her beliefs. She was raised in a Christian home, but yet she practices black magic and she practices white magic and gray magic and, everything in between. And we're sitting there and, it's dark out by this time. The backside of her bedroom wall is just all windows. And I'm facing the windows. She's facing me. So her back's to the window. And all of a sudden, we get hit with this incredibly loud scream, roar. It was just insane how loud it was. And my body immediately reacted to it. The first thing that went through my mind was, shit, I left my fucking car in the gun, or my gun in the car. And then the second thought that went through my head was, shit, I got 40 pounds of dog food in my back seat. Where that came from, I have no idea. But my body was, she whipped around and looked at the windows at the moment that it happened. I took my headphones off because I had Mickey Mouse headphones on. I took those off and she looked at me and she goes, did you hear that? And I was like, yeah, I heard that. What the hell was that? And she's like, isn't that cool? That's my big boy. And I was like, holy shit. Now I'm going to tell you that my body's reaction to what I heard, every inch of my body had chill bumps on it. I had goose flesh everywhere. I've never had goosebumps on the side of my torso or, all up and down my legs. And it came in a wave and then it kind of dissipated a little bit, but then it came back and it wasn't quite as strong. And then it kind of dissipated a little bit more and then it came back, but it wasn't as strong as the next time. And it was really weird. It was really weird. But, my equipment, I got high dollar equipment. I knew for a fact that there was no way that my mics did not pick this thing up. I knew when I got home that the first thing I was doing was putting this into the computer and pulling that audio up because I knew I caught something. So we continue on with the conversation. It took us a little bit to get past that. So then we got back into the conversation. We talked about some more stuff related to, witchcraft and her coven and how you'd be surprised at how many witches there are in this small area. And we get to the end of it and I've already started packing up my stuff and she's sitting on the edge of her bed. She's got like a car length leather coat on, blue jeans. She's sitting on the corner of her bed. She's facing me and she's saying something. I wish I could remember what it was she was saying. But I'm looking at her, and as I'm looking at her, you know what an Etch-a-Sketch is, right? The kid's toy. So if you ever look at the screen of an Etch-a-Sketch, you can see that like sparkly sand that's underneath the glass. That when you move the thing, that's what it pulls the line through. So that sparkly, it's not bright. It's just kind of that's what I see, like kind of come over her. And as that happens, her face, because I think she was like 47 at the time, all the lines in her face kind of just go away, and her hair gets a little bit longer, and she's like sitting there in front of me, bare ass naked.
What?
And she looks like she's like an 18 to 20-year-old version of herself. And dude, I lost my words. I had nothing. I just looked at her. And then just like that slight sparkly looking shit happened again. And when I blinked my eyes, she's back to sitting in her leather coat and her blue jeans. And she leans forward. She leans forward to me, and she gets this freaking Cheshire cat grin on her face. And she goes, "What's the matter, hun? What did you see?" And I said, "I didn't say I saw anything." And she goes, "Oh." And I was like, inside, I'm like, what the mother? What? Now I'm questioning my sanity, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like really nerved out. I want to go. I want to get out. And I stand back up. I get my suitcase in the one hand. I get my bag in the other hand. I got all my stuff. I'm waiting for her to open the door so we can walk down the hallway, down the stairs. And before she opens the door, she says, "Hey, I got a friend of mine I think would be a really good fit on your show." And I said, "Oh, really?" And she goes, "Yeah, I think you'd get along really well with him. His name's Eric, too." And I said, "Erick Vernor?" And she whipped her head around at me and looked at me, and she goes, "Yeah, how did you know?" And I said, "I didn't know. How did you know?" And she's like, "What?" And I said, "I've been trying to get a hold of Erick Vernor for over 2.5 months. I said, I've contacted him on his Facebook under Erick Vernor. I've contacted him on his Facebook under his pen name Corvus Nocturnum. I said, my very first interview suggested I get a hold of this guy because he'd be a great interview. And I said, he will not respond to me at all. And I said, and then you just pull that name right out of your butt. 7 billion names you could have pulled out, and you pull out a name of somebody that I've been looking for 2.5 months. And she's like, "Well, I'll just send him a text and he'll get back with you in the next couple of days." Erick Vernor was recommended to me by my very first interview. He was a demonologist out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. He didn't know Susan, the witch. She didn't know him. I never made it public that I was looking for this guy other than trying to get a hold of him on his Facebook. I never asked anybody to help me find him. The only person I ever tried to get back in contact with was my first interview, who never responded to me. And then 3 days later, I get a message from Erick Vernor, and he's like, "Hey, Susan said you've been trying to get a hold of me and you want to do an interview. I'd love to." He happens to be a reverend in the Church of Satan out of Fort Wayne, Indiana.
There's a lot going on there, my friend.
So we walk out to my car. I open up the back door. I'm putting my stuff in there. There's the 40 pounds of dog food, right? And she stands at the front of my car, in front of the hood, facing the back part of her property, which is all wooded. And she puts her hands up to her mouth and she goes, "Whoop." And within 10 seconds, from way back on the other side of the creek, up the side of the ravine, there's a whoop, comes back. And then about 5 seconds later, way off to the right, there's another one that sounds like it's twice as far away that goes whoop. And she turns around and she looks at me and she's smiling and she goes, "Isn't that neat? Isn't that cool?" And I was like, "I don't know. Is it?
Like,
is it
what
really
is happening?"
I just would have said no.
She's like, "I put food out for them. They come and take it off the back deck." She's like, it's just a thing.
I would have said no. It's not just a thing.
It's like,
It's just not happen. Okay.
man,
So
you said she lives close to you, right?
yeah. Well, that property and
Relatively
that house
close.
is still within 30 minutes of me. She's left that property. She now lives smack dab in the middle of the Manistee National Forest, where she is currently communing with the Sasquatch and the dogmen of mid Michigan.
That's sounds fitting. That checks out. Is the area where you're from, is it prevalent for Sasquatch sightings?
You know, so here's the thing. I live 7 miles north of Notre Dame, University of Notre Dame. I live in South Bend. It's a city. So, there's there's some wooded areas around and stuff. But when you start getting to the area where she was at, to be completely honest with you, that area was maybe a 15-minute drive away from the 1964 sighting of the Dewey Lake Monster in Dowagiac, Michigan, which, if you guys know what the Dewey Lake Monster is, it was the summer of 64. I think the first sighting happened on June 3rd. I did an episode about it. That whole thing even led into me hosting my first Bigfoot conference, which was Bigfoot and Brews, which I held in Dowagiac, Michigan at the Sister Lakes Brewing Company back in September of last year.
I remember that.
A mile and a half away from where the first sighting was of the Dewey Lake Monster. But,
That's awesome.
And then my episode 2 and 3 is about a gentleman and his 2 daughters who hunted some property about another 20 minutes away on the eastern side of Dowagiac, who had one walk out in front of him on opening day about 9 years ago. And, so there is a pattern in lower Southwest Michigan that coincides with even sightings back in the 1965 Monroe Monster, which happened on the lower southeast side of Michigan. In Monroe, Michigan, it was nearly an identical set of sightings. So, I don't know if we're dealing with a corridor for Sasquatch through lower Michigan, or if it's someplace that is, possibly, depending on who you talk to, people say that they have a range of 50 to 100 miles in any direction from where they're like based at. So, it all kind of adds up to, even if you look at what is it, the BFRO website, or if you go to Scott's the Bigfoot Mapping Project and check that out, there's a number of sightings that have been reported through the lower part of the state of Michigan. So, and the fact that I live like right on the state line, and my kids grew up in Michigan. I lived in Michigan when I was married. There's a pretty decent amount of evidence to support that they're in this area.
That's awesome. I was just curious, and I got to ask, because I ask all my Bigfoot people.
Yeah.
So, are you in the biological flesh and blood Bigfoot camp, that it is some sort of primate that is not been documented by science, but it is flesh and blood? Or are you in the camp where it's something metaphysical, something possibly interdimensional, or is it a conglomeration of the two? Just curious as to your thoughts on that.
Okay, so here's my take on it. Kyle, Steve, imagine your life 10,000 years ago with a loincloth wrapped around your niblets, sleeping around a fire with one eye open, spear in your hand. You've got a couple of females in your tribe. You got a couple of young kids in your tribe, and you have to provide food. You have to protect against predators, because essentially you're food for the taking as well. And imagine what your senses would have been back when we were that people. You know, we talk about having an extra sixth sense, or, some people, blind people, their hearing becomes better. People who can't hear, their other senses over and become more acute. What if we had additional senses when we were those people? We've had walls around us and windows that you can close and doors you can lock for so long now. It only makes sense that those kind of traits that would have been something that we relied on really heavily aren't a part of our regular psyche now. We don't have to worry about somebody breaking into our house for the most part. We lock our doors. Our houses are made out of brick, and we don't have to worry about storms. We don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But what if we were those people that had to rely on our senses? What if we had to rely on our gut? What if we had to rely on how we felt when there was a predator that might be 75 to 100 yards away from us, but they're in the area and something's off? What if Bigfoot, what if these Sasquatch still have those kind of senses about them? It would make them harder to see, harder to find, much better at hiding. It would make them, so much better than us in that environment. So that's kind of where, but here's the other thing. If you read Ron Moorhead's book about the quantum Bigfoot, he goes into a lot of stuff about frequency and the quantum entanglement of all this stuff. And frequency and vibration are a big thing. And it's a big thing in our natural world. So if you had something that was capable of producing infrasound, which is a naturally occurring thing. Tigers produce it. Elephants, they produce it. There was a tribe in Africa that had elephants that had not been around for a long, long time, and the elephants started moving back into their area, and their suicides went up considerably when the elephants came back around, and they realized that what it was because the amount of infrasound that the herd of elephants was producing was negatively affecting people who were susceptible to being, and they were committing suicide. So if you have a creature that's out there that is, anywhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 9 or 10 feet tall by reports, with the weight of anywhere from, 5 to 1,200 pounds, like has been reported. And they have a vocal capability, which, recorded vocalizations of things that just don't make any sense. And when some of them are broke down, and, the guy that broke down the Sierra Sounds, the guy that Scott Nelson, who used to be a cryptolinguist for the Navy, when you start breaking it down and you start questioning the possibility that they might have multiple sets of vocal cords in order to make the sounds that they're making, what if they can create a frequency? What if they can create a vibration that can alter how we see? Have you ever been to a rock concert and decided to push yourself all the way up to the front so you were real close to the speakers, or be at a competition stereo a stereo competition, for cars where they have these incredible bass units in their cars that just a lot of you. It's hard to see, and one of the main reasons that I kind of focus on this is I've talked to a woman who was out hunting her son. Her husband was there too, but he was in a different area of the woods. She got the distinct impression that she was in the presence of one of these things. She started getting the dread and the feeling like they should be getting out of there. So she motioned for her son to get out of his stand. He started making his way to her, and she was trying not to panic him. So, they were moving with purpose, but she wasn't really being forthright with him as far as why. And she said at one point she looked back behind them, and she said they've hunted that property for years. She was very familiar with the area and very familiar with all of the different trees, and that's where they hunted. And she looked back and saw the environment change. It was still trees, it was still leaves, it was still sky, but it wasn't what should have been there. So I wonder if these things have the ability to use frequency and vibration to do some of the things that they do. Some people say these things can cloak, right? They just go all predator. Well, what if they're not doing that? What if they're affecting our visual interpretation of them? What if the vibration that they're producing or the frequency that they're producing is jumbling up our vision so that we're not seeing them?
I didn't even think of that.
So is it a woo thing or is it a natural thing? I think we have to look at is we don't understand it, so it's easy to throw it in the woo category. But these may be natural attributes that they have. We just haven't had for tens of thousands of years.
I didn't even think about like being able to manipulate audio frequency to where it affects our senses as humans. That's solid.
Because there's a documentary out somewhere. I don't even know if it was a documentary or if it was just a segment in a show, but there were a couple of guys and they were both sound engineers, and they had taken just a shit ton of equipment with them, big speakers and all kinds of soundboards and stuff. And they actually set it up inside of Stonehenge, and they were bouncing a bunch of different frequencies. They were bouncing them off of the rocks that make up Stonehenge, because they thought they had some kind of a theory that, it might be something, some kind of a resonance cavity within it that, maybe during some kind of rhythmic drumming or something like that back in the day when it was whatever it was designed to be, that, the use of it, maybe they thought, it would incite like some kind of, like a hypnotic trance, or, it might put you into some kind of a altered state of mind by hearing all this stuff. So they were bouncing all these different low frequencies, high frequencies. They were going through all this stuff. But when they started getting down to the infrasonic sounds in the lower frequencies, the one guy he had to bow out. He had to leave because he was physically getting ill. His eyes were messed up. He was feeling a weird palpitation in his chest, almost like it was affecting his heart's ability to beat in a regular rhythm. And they had to shit can the study. So, I kind of always go back to that. And it's like frequency and vibration, man, can do a lot of things to a human body that a lot of people I don't think realize.
So. Yeah, I'd never even thought to make the connection, but now that you've planted that seed in my brain, I'm like, all right.
It makes a lot of sense. It really does. I was hoping with the Stonehenge thing, you were going to say they were trying to open a portal. And I was like, hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Hell, maybe they were. Who knows?
It is. Well, and it's funny. It's funny you bring that up because like Ancient Apocalypse, those guys they were on Rogan, and he made one of the most simplest yet amazing points I've heard in a long time when it comes to ancient technologies and trying to understand the things that we don't understand. And it would be the same way. I would apply the same analogy he gave to your Bigfoot equation here. We don't even, when it comes to ancient technologies and maybe the use of frequency or vibration or whatever it is, we don't know the technology we're looking for. We attribute technology as in computers and automobiles. That doesn't necessarily apply to the past, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So all this time we could be looking at a piece of technology, but it's not technology to us because we don't understand that technology. And
Exactly.
The same equation applies to your Bigfoot here, because that we don't correlate it. You know, we're not essentially looking for this because, like you said, we don't understand it.
Right.
So it totally, totally makes
think,
sense.
We think about technology, and you know, the first thing you're going to do is it's a phone.
Exactly.
Or it's the roadcaster that's sitting in front of me, or it's, you know, my computer.
Yes.
You know.
Yep.
Precisely.
Back to your witch real quick.
Yeah.
Because that story is awesome.
I never did. No, I did not.
You never know. Did you eat when you went out with her?
No, I had one old fashioned while we were sitting there while she ate.
Because you know there's like a little bit of mysticism behind that as well, right?
How's that?
Like there is power because how to say this. When we talked about this off air subtly earlier. However, we were informed that when it comes to certain things in our lives, you should not accept food from people because there's power in that.
Oh,
that's the first thing that chalked my brain off when she's
I thought the same thing.
Did you eat? And I'm like,
wow.
oh shit. Like she's trying to trap him.
I did not.
Yeah,
I did
there's
not.
totally.
But I will go back and say this. So when I put that recording on my computer, there is nothing there. You can hear at the very end of the last word that she said before we both turned our heads to look at the window. She says the word and as she's pronouncing the D in the word and, in the background, you can hear the very slightest little ooh, almost like a hoot owl.
So and that's weird.
It is so weird.
And then like 3 or 4 days later, it hit me. Because I started thinking, it's like, you know, it kept coming in waves. And then the next time it came, it wasn't quite as strong. And then it wasn't quite as strong. And then it wasn't quite as strong. And then pretty much you couldn't really detect it anymore. Now it's like, you know, it was almost like I got a shock. It was almost like I was getting a shock, electrical. And then I was like, oh, fuck. That's what people are talking about when they say they got zapped. That's it. And then it like became crystal clear to me. I was like, holy crap, that was infrasound. And I got zapped. That thing was outside her windows across the street in the middle of a little wooded area that sits in the middle of a farm field. You know how when you go past a farm and they always have that one little segment of trees that they never took down?
Yeah.
You wonder why did they not? I mean, why did you just not finish the job and get the trees out of there, right? He was standing in there. That's my assumption. And he directed that infrasound straight at her windows. He either knew we were talking about it or this was predetermined by her, you know, to, hey, let's screw with this guy or whatever, you know, I don't know. That all sounds insane if you say it out loud. But, you know, like 4 or 5 days later, I finally called her and I said, hey, Susan, I need to know, did you do that to me? And she said, do what? And then I explained how from the moment I saw her, there was like, it was so hard for me to do that interview because everything in my brain was just wanting to just,
Right.
and then to see her sitting naked in front of me with that whole shimmery shit. She says, like, no, I didn't do that. And I said, but then who would have, and she goes, well, maybe it was my spirit guides. And I said, to what end? What the hell would, and she goes, I don't know. Maybe they were testing your intentions.
That's weird.
And I was
it's heavy.
Oh,
that's weird.
Maybe they were testing my intentions. Maybe they were tempting me with everything they could. And I still don't know for what purpose.
Right.
But, so yeah, that was dude, I'm telling you what, that thing still trips me out. When I start thinking about it and I talk about it, I still get the chills.
I'll bet.
It was nuts. But, that was my 5th episode.
Yeah. What a way to start.
Yeah.
So,
what a way to start.
Boots on the ground journalism, 5 episodes in.
What a banger, right? And
yeah,
it wasn't a banger really until much later when, I start talking about it on other shows and everybody is like, holy crap. So
it makes me wonder with her big feats there.
Yeah.
Do you think they were more or less her protectors?
It certainly seems like there was some relationship there. She would say that she would go back, like that first place that I told you where that guardrail was. She would walk back there, and she said that there was a large tree that had fallen over, and there was almost like a worn seat in the tree trunk that had been just like it was used so much that it was just wore down like it was a seat. And she said she would go back there and she would sit there and she would sing to him in her native Algonquin tongue. And she would leave like honey buns or, candy or stuff like that for him, take it out of the wrapper and then leave it out there for him. And she said they like to hear her sing, so, but now she's living up in the North Woods with the big feet and
That is awesome.
And the dog man.
That is awesome. Which brings me, I've got 2 more here real quick. You made the comment about how she said you'd be surprised how many other witches are in the area. It's weird you say that because I had somebody close to me who started wanting to dabble in witchcraft.
Right.
And he was able to successfully find covens around here, which is interesting. And then same connection. And I don't know if you know much about witchcraft or if any of the listeners are going to know much about witchcraft, but he told me about this story, and it's not far from us, but he said the whole purpose of trying to get into this coven was to learn more about it and to verify / go to this location where there was supposedly an old witch that lived out in the middle of the woods. And he had the location, the whole 9. And supposedly it's just like a small shack out there. But around this shack, I cannot remember the number. I'd have to figure out the number, but I'm going to say 6. There are, and it could be 8, could be 9, could be whatever it is. But around the perimeter of the property, this woman supposedly has 6 all white German shepherds staked around the property. Like this special, I don't know the significance of it, but it fascinates the hell out of me. Is it protection? Is it some type of ritual she's doing? Like what could it be?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I didn't know if you had any insight, No,
I don't. That's about, I've got some lasting relationships that I have fostered with some white witches, who basically what they do is just on the light side, and I don't mean on the like light beer side. I mean,
right,
on the light side of that, trying to do things that are good to try to help people and stuff like that. I think maybe I pretty much learned my lesson as far as, the those who delve into the darker side of things. I mean, she admitted to me that some guy had been he had been messing with like one of her cousins or a niece or something like that. Wasn't treating her very good, and basically she had enough of it. She put a whammy on him that made him puke blood for 3 days.
Wow.
And go to the hospital, and after 3 days she called it off, and the doctors were like, have no idea where the blood's coming from. And so I mean, again, that's
crazy.
That's her telling the tale. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but
I'm not going to test it.
Yeah.
There were, in that area, specifically that area with the Bigfoot, just going back to that, there's a gentleman over near Detroit who he's actually the one that introduced me to her. He's investigated that property multiple times. And after the night after I hosted Bigfoot and Brews this past September, he took a group of guys out to that property. And later that night, he sent me a photograph of a footprint taken with night vision of a foot in the mud.
That's awesome
out there. So, that area is still active.
It's awesome.
I love it.
That is awesome.
But you go through that, and like when I was younger, I was 21. My dad was hit and killed by a car, which really sucked. But he was drunk, leaving a bar, and decided to walk home across the 5-lane highway. And hey, do as I say, not as I do, right? So, but after that happened, and this was months later, and nothing really started happening right off the bat. Can remember at all, but it was months later, like probably 7 or 8 months later. I had gone and I had a wild hair up my ass, and I was like, I'm going to buy a cordless phone. This is what, 1987. Yeah. So early 1988, probably. I decided to go to one of the big box warehouses, and I bought myself a cordless phone for the first time in my life. And then I was standing there and I was looking, I'm like, you know what? I want to buy a goddamn answering machine too, because I'm that important, right? At 22 years old, I need an answering machine and a cordless phone. And so I bought it. I got it all hooked up and everything. And I don't know, I had it maybe for a couple of weeks. And one night I'm in bed, I'm sleeping. It's like 2:00 in the morning, somewhere around. And the phone rings. Well, when you get a phone call at that time of night, it's never good, right? So I pick it up and I said, hello. And there's this voice on the other side of the phone, and it says, hey, boy. And then, I mean, a lot of people don't know what it's like to have a landline anymore, but when a landline would hang up, you would hear a click, and then it would go when it was disconnected. And that's what it did. Well, for the majority of my life, my name to my dad was Boy. Hey, boy, don't you think you better go cut the grass? Hey, boy, don't you think you ought to go watch the car? Hey, boy, what you doing tonight? Hey, boy, and it wasn't really I don't think it was ever meant as like to be disrespectful or anything. It was just, that was his name for me. Hey, boy, grab me a Coke out of the fridge. Hey, boy, while you're up, change the channel on the TV, before we had remotes. So, I answer the phone and I'm sitting up in bed, I'm awake, and I hear this voice say, "Hey, boy," and then it disconnects. And I sat there and I looked at the phone for a little bit, and I hung it up and pushed the antenna back down. I put it back on its base. And as soon as I put it back down on the base, freaking phone rang again. And I picked it up, pulled the antenna out. I said, "Hello." And there's a female voice on the end of the line. She says, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Excuse me?" She says, "Is there anybody in the house that shouldn't be there?" And I said, "What?" She says, "This is Sergeant so and so with the South Bend Police Department. Is there somebody in the house that shouldn't be there?" And I said, "Ma'am, I'm in bed." And she's like, "Well, I'll stay on the phone with you. Would you please get up and make sure that there's not, that everything's okay?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I really don't understand what's going on here." And she says, "We just received a 911 call from this phone. And protocol is if we receive a 911 call and then it hangs up, we call that number back to make sure to see if somebody answers. If they don't, we'll send somebody out. Will you please just go check, make sure everything's fine in the house?" And I said, "Ma'am, I'm the only one here." And I walked through the whole house. I checked the whole house. I had my Smith and Wesson 44, nickel plated 44 in my hands as I'm walking through the house naked, holding this cordless phone up, hoping like hell that I'm not going to run into somebody in the house. And so I come back into the bedroom and I said, "Ma'am, there's nobody in here." And she goes, "Okay." She's like, "Well, do you by chance have a cordless phone?" And I said, "Yeah, actually I do." I said, "I just got one a couple of weeks ago." And she goes, "Oh, well, that might explain it because supposedly we've heard reports that um, cordless phones are inadvertently dialing 911 on their own." And I mean, that's the whole thing is completely bizarre, right?
Yeah.
So then I start thinking later on, and it's like, so the long and the short of it was, I didn't realize that my mom and dad's relationship was not very good throughout, the last part of his life. So when he passed away, she kind of started going and sowing her oats. And she found another guy, and she was actually spending a lot of time staying at his place. So I continued to live in our family home alone. And, I kind of felt, I mean, I was 22, so it wasn't like she was leaving a 12-year-old kid home alone. But, I was only child and I'd never been really separated from my parents for any reason. And it felt weird that, she was with some other guy, and I was still kind of coming to terms with the fact that they weren't really in a great spot, relationship wise, and I had no idea about it. So I started thinking, and it's like, man, was it like 911? Did he think I needed help because I was alone? Because he felt like my mom like bugged out on me? It's like, did he call 911 before he called me? Or was that just the most bizarre circumstances of coincidence that, seconds, not minutes, seconds passed between those two calls? They had to be related. They had to have been.
Yeah, it's almost like in my brain, it's like the same time he was calling to check on you, the call was also being made to
Yeah.
911 dispatch.
Yeah.
That's so wild. That's so wild.
And then, you start moving forward into, I'm doing this podcast I was like, I want to talk to people that do this, that have these experiences, one for somewhat of a vindication of my own experiences. We could be here for, 4 hours if I told you everything that I've had happen in my life. And quite frankly, when you say it all out loud at one time, you feel like, you feel like a freaking nutcase because, somebody's going to be like, come on, man, seriously. But, over the course of 57 years,
weird shit happens.
It does, and once I started doing this show, weird stuff start happening more. The synchronicities, the weird tendrils that reach out of one episode and go into another, people not knowing each other but connecting me with somebody that they both knew, and things like that is just too much to not pay attention to, and too much to just say, that was what are the chances? Chances are pretty freaking slim. And that story about the witch, Tony at the Confessionals had me come down, or had me record with him about that. And, he was so taken back by that whole story. He asked me to tell him a bunch of the other things that I had happened throughout my life for like a members only episode. And, I guess that was a pretty good success for him as far as shows went. And we kind of fostered a little bit of friendship between him and I, and a couple other people that we kind of had common friends. And so this led to, me meeting Joel Thomas, and anybody that has listened to Joel on other shows, there seems to be a thing that happens every time he gets on somebody's episode and starts talking about these specific things. We start having these interferences that happen during the recording process. I was recording with him one night, and I don't know, do you guys use a Rodecaster at all?
Yeah. Yep. We both have one.
Okay. So, the touch screen.
Yeah.
All right. Have you ever seen that start to vibrate back and forth, left and right? Just start shaking back and forth?
Nope.
So I have that happening while I'm talking to him. And we're having problems with him sending me the files from Zencastr on his side. He keeps sending it to me, and each time it comes through the email, I'm only getting 20 minutes of the entire show. And, it was just a bunch of different crazy technical things. And it's technology. Okay. You got to expect that you're going to have technical difficulties when you're using mechanical stuff. Stuff that runs on electricity, things that have, computer boards and chips in them, something's going to fail at some point. So I'm having all these different problems. And then he goes on to another episode, the Cryptids of the Corn, and they do an episode with him. He starts touching on the same things he was talking to me about, and they have a complete failure with their system. It completely goes down, and it's got a battery backup to keep that from ever happening. But the battery backup doesn't kick in. And they even contact the manufacturer of the device, and they said, no, that's impossible. That can't happen. That's why it's got the failsafe for the battery in it. And then he goes on to another show and has the same type of problems. So Tony decides to have us all come down to Tennessee to record with him in the studio and basically try to suss out the whole damn thing and see if we can get it to replicate the same problems while we're all there, and, and try to get through it. So we did that, and he set the date for us to come down. And like I said, I live in South Bend, Indiana, and I put in the GPS coordinates of the Airbnb that we were going to be staying at, and it came up with 7.5 hours travel time. I knew I was going to have to stop for gas twice and probably have to grab something to eat real quick on the way down. But should have been no more than a 8 hour and 15-minute haul the whole way there. So, I'm following the route on my GPS. It's taking me the fastest way. I'm going along the outside eastern outside edge of Indianapolis, so I'm not running into Indiana traffic. Indianapolis traffic, it's around 3:00, so I'm not hitting any of that. I stop and I get gas at 10:30 in the morning before I even leave. I get gas at 10:30 in the morning. Joel Thomas calls me and says, "Hey, buddy, how's everything going? You getting on the road?" And I'm like, "Yep, I literally just pulled out on the road from the gas station. I'm headed that way." He's like, "All right, man, see you." So I get off the phone with him, heading down. I get on the eastern side of Indianapolis, no traffic, everything's good. And then I get to and this is the one weird thing was I was like really surprised when I saw that I was in Kentucky. I thought it came up kind of quick. I was like, man, and the other weird thing about it was that I'm typically, like I listen to Tool, I listen to Slipknot, I love loud music. And if I'm not listening to loud music, I'm listening to a podcast. But this trip, I decided for whatever reason, I don't think it was a cognizant thing. It wasn't something I was conscious of. I just kind of was in my own head. I wasn't really listening to anything. Didn't have the radio on. I wasn't listening to podcasts. I was kind of rehearsing a little bit in my head of how I thought some of the conversation was going to go when we started talking about this, and making sure that I was sure of my standpoint on things that I wanted to make sure that I got across. And so I was in my head that whole trip. And I get down to now, one group of guys is coming out of Ada, Ohio. The other guy, Joel, is coming out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm coming out of South Bend. So we're all taking 3 different routes, but essentially once you get to Lexington, we all got off on the same exit, 75, which was right by the big water tower as you're going into Lexington. And so I get to that Lexington exit, and there's a little bit of traffic, and it shows up on my GPS, and it shows like I'm going to be 15 minutes sitting there. And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking out the windows and just kind of still in my head, and I'm looking, and it's like, it is the most beautiful blue sky. There is not a cloud to be seen anywhere. And I'm kind of in awe of the fact that there's not a cloud in the sky. I'm sure I've seen other days like that, but it just struck me that there's no clouds. And I looked back off to my right-hand side, and I was looking at the big ass water tower, and it said Lexington, the jewel of Kentucky, or something like that on it. And as I was looking at that, I see this tiny little cloud off to the upper right-hand side of it. And it's like this little marshmallow of a cloud. And I can remember saying to myself in my head, this is stupid, but I was like, look, a poor little guy. Everybody left him. He got left behind, And, and I started looking around again, and then my attention got drawn back to this cloud, and I looked back up at the cloud, and that's when I noticed that it was, and I was trying to explain this like before we started recording. It was almost like if you were looking at an image in a 3D rendering program on a computer, where you can like grab a cube and you can like twist it and turn it and look at it from all different angles. That's kind of what this cloud was doing. It seemed to be just kind of tumbling on itself. It wasn't really moving towards me or away from me. It didn't seem like it was caught up in the wind or anything, moving in any direction. It was just kind of tumbling on itself. And as I watched this thing, I was kind of in awe of, I don't think I ever saw a cloud roll on itself like that. And as it was doing it, it started to kind of come apart, essentially. And after a minute or so, it had broken apart into three very similar looking pieces, and those pieces all looked like if you took the yin and the yang symbol apart, and you had those two little tadpoles that kind of nest up against each other. If you took the white one and you put three of them up in the sky and you kind of position them into like kind of a crude triangle, that's what these things looked like. And they still looked like clouds. There were no hard edges to any of them. It wasn't like looking at a street sign or anything. They were just all in the same shape, but there were three of them. And then is like, I'm looking at it, and then it just kind of dissipated, and it was gone, and the whole cloud was gone. It dissipated. It wasn't like it blew away. I didn't watch it move off to the right or the left. It just dissipated. And I was sitting there and I was like, what in the hell was that? And I mean, my head's like, did I just see a UFO? Was that a vision from God? Was that, I was like, I don't know what the hell I saw. I don't understand what I saw. And, so I get through the traffic, and, everything's rolling again. And in about 40 minutes later, 35 minutes, 40 minutes later, I pull into, I forget what town it is in Kentucky, but there's a Buc-ee's truck stop, and I needed to get gas. Now, okay, here's where a friend of mine pops into the picture. And I had this psychic light worker. She's a number of things. She was on my show. Her name's JJ Rose 777. And she was one of three people besides my two children who knew where I was going and why I was going there. And when I saw that Buc-ee's sign, I looked down at my gas tank, and it was half tank. And before I went on the road, she had sent me a text message and said, don't let your gas get below a half tank. So I listened to her. She had done some things in the past as far as gifts that she has that had already proven to me to be pretty substantial, and I buy into it. I'm a big believer when it comes to her. So I pulled in. I was on the phone with somebody as I pulled into that gas station. I pulled up the pump, and I said, I've never seen anything like this. There's got to be like 300 gas islands with, to fill up. And she's like, oh yeah, Buc-ee's are incredible. And I was like, this is insane. I've never seen a gas station this big. And I said, I got to let you go. I'm going to fill up with gas. And I said, when I get back on the road, I'll call you back. And she said, okay. I hung up the phone. It was 7:00 on the dot. 7:00 p.m. Now, from South Bend down to Tennessee, there's no time change. All right. It's all on Eastern time. I've been on the road since 10:30 this morning. It was supposed to take me eight and a quarter hours. I fill up with gas. I pull around to the front of the Buc-ee's. I run inside. I go in. I take a leak. I run over to the brisket station. I grab a brisket sandwich. I go up and I pay for it. I'm not waiting in line for anybody. I'm the only person at the cash register. I pay for it. I get in my car. I pull out of that parking space, pull around to the side of the building, enter another parking space, and I wolf down that brisket sandwich in like 3 minutes flat. I get back on the road, and this person tries to call me. and I've got my phone in a cradle that's hanging off a suction cup on my windshield. I take my finger and swipe it to answer the call, and the screen of my phone won't react to my finger. It just keeps ringing, and it doesn't answer. And then she calls me back again, a second time. Same thing. I can't get my finger to react with the screen of my phone. Third time, I can't get my finger, and I was like, well, shit, it's connected to my car. So I just pushed the button on my sync to answer the call. The screen on my phone goes to the screen on my iPhone goes to like it's answering the call, and then the call drops. Then I try to call her, and the call wouldn't go through. So I'm like, well, shit, next time I stop, I'm not going to try to do this while I'm driving. So the next time that I stop or whatever, I'll call her and let her know everything's okay. So I'm driving, and I get a message banner that pops up on my phone from Instagram. And it's a listener of mine who in her message says that she was listening to one of my episodes and she set her phone down. And as she set her phone down, the episode stops playing. The Ghost app on her phone opens up on its own. She says she picks up her phone and holds it up in front of her, and there's a stick figure standing in front of her in her apartment in, of all places, Oregon, completely on the other side of the country. And she says, I can't help but feel that this is here for you. And I'm like, what? There's a ghost in your apartment in Oregon and it's there for me? I'm like, so I'm like, weird people, right?
Right.
Weird people reading stuff into shit. And then I get a phone call from Joel, who is already down at the Airbnb. And he's like, hey, man, what's going on? Everything all right? And I'm like, yeah. I have no idea why it's taken so long. I said, I barely stopped twice. I said, it took me like 3 minutes to wolf down a sandwich. I said, I've been on the road the whole time. I said, I don't know what the hell is going on, but it's still telling me that, I got like 2.5 hours to go. Well, this was 8:00. So I still had an hour and a half to go. And he's like, Jesus, dude, get your ass down here. And I said, I'm trying, and then I get a phone call from Tony. At first I get a text message from Tony. He's like, yo, dude, you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And it's like, why is everybody worried about me? And then I said, I'm driving. I don't want to text. Call me. So he calls me and he says, hey, man, tell your fans I'm not your fetch boy bitch, delivering messages to you and all that. And I was like, dude, what are you talking about? And he's like, I got a message sent to me from one of your listeners on my Instagram. And it says, can you please check on Erick? He's gone off the grid, and Buc-ee's truck stops have been known for missing time phenomenon.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, I'm already struggling with trying to understand why it's taken me so long to get where I'm going. I've had very little interruption. There's nothing that points to, well, you've had 2 hours of downtime. I didn't pull off the road and take a nap. I didn't have a breakdown. Nothing happened. I've been on the road the whole time. I saw the weird cloud thing. That kind of messed with me a little bit. And now I've got this woman that I've been talking to for quite a while is using that of all things and it winds up being her sense of humor, because Buc-ee's, which I had Buc-ee's before, But Bucky's is like, I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen that many gas pumps. I had no idea you could go in and buy hunting equipment. I didn't know that you could buy a deer feeder there. You know, they had deer feeders out in the front.
Oh
Barbecue smokers,
You know,
you name it.
I imagine I probably could have bought like a lawn tractor there if I would have looked, you know, but again, I just went in, took a piss, grabbed the sandwich and got the hell out. And he's like, shouldn't you be here by now? And I was like, yeah, I should be. But I said, I don't know what's going on. He's like, well, what time's it saying? And I said, it's saying I'm supposed to be there at 9:34. And he's like, well, Jesus Christ. And, you know, so I keep driving. And then Joel calls me back again. It's 8:00, straight up 8:00. And he's like, yo, man, shit's popping off at the Airbnb already. I was just getting ready to go on and record for an hour with LA before you got here. And he's like, as soon as we got on, we started talking about the angelic wars on Mars and the power went out. Well, if you go back to the issues that we've had with Joel on other shows, you know, it's no surprise that the power goes out, right?
Right.
So, you know, I'm kind of in limbo here because, you know, at this point now I'm starting to realize that something has slowed my progress. I went through this after it was all over and done with. You know, I went back through and there would have had to been like a span of an hour and a half that I was only driving 35 miles an hour, you know, on these highways, which, you know, as well as I do, if a cop would have seen me driving that slow, I would have been pulled over. It just, none of it makes sense. And, you know, I start getting pretty close to the destination. And, JJ had sent me an additional message, wanting to know how it was going. And I told her, I said, you know, I'm still not there yet. And she's like, oh my God, what's going on? What happened? And it's like, everything's fine. I can't text you right now because, you know, I'm driving. And now by this time it's already dark. And I get down to about 10 minutes away from my destination. And Tony calls me and he's like, dude, are you here yet? And I said, I'm 10 minutes out. And he's like, Jesus Christ. He said, well, Christian and we're going to go pick up some pops at the gas station. I said, dude, please get me a pop, get me a Coke. I need one bad. And so I get down there and I get on the final road into this neighborhood to the Airbnb. And I'm looking, and as I start to turn into the driveway of the Airbnb, as soon as my lights hit the gravel road, the gravel driveway, the lights at the Airbnb come on. As soon as my lights hit it, the lights come back on. And I don't know. I mean, I recognized it, but it wasn't like, oh, that was weird. That didn't happen. That didn't hit me until like later on. That was really strange that power came back on right as I got there. Like literally as soon as the lights from my vehicle hit the pavement or the gravel driveway, the lights came back on. And all the guys in the part or the Airbnb, they come out, they greet me, and I get my stuff. We take it inside, and I'm in there, and I start telling them about this cloud. And Joel jumps up out of his seat and he goes, I saw that same freaking cloud. And I said, no, you did not. He's like, I swear to God, I did. And then I look over at Justin and Jay, and they're looking at each other like slack-jawed, you know, just kind of like, and Justin points to Jay, and Jay looks over at me and he's like, we saw that cloud too, because it was the only cloud in the sky. And I was like, you know, F you guys. I said, screw this. I said, and I walked over to the little desk over there. And I grabbed a couple of sheets of paper. I said, you draw what you saw. And so each one of us drew what we saw. Only on the backside of my paper, I drew what I saw it turn into. I drew what it started off and then what it turned into. And at that point, Tony walks in the door with Christian, and everybody's like, hey, Tony, how's it going? And he's like, hey, what are you guys doing? What are you up to? And I said, hey, do anything. I said, take this, go grab everybody else's, look at him, tell me what you see. Because he had nothing, he had no idea of the conversation, nothing about it. So he gets all these pictures and he puts them together and he's like, so y'all drew the same thing. So what? And I was like, oh shit. And then he laid them down on the coffee table, and Christian actually took a picture of it. And it's like, holy shit, they even had the bottom, like I said, the bottom had kind of a weird rough edge to it. They even had that drawn in there too. And
so weird.
So, you know, we started talking about that, explaining the whole thing to Tony. And then Tony sits down. We're having a pretty deep discussion. I'm noticing that Joel is like, I don't want to say he was really withdrawn or anything, but you know, he was really engaged in the conversation with us. Tony and my conversation was going more into Christianity, and Justin and Jay, they were kind of having their own conversation. And I don't know, man, it was starting to get late. You know, it was probably around 1:00, 1:30. We've been talking for a long time. And Tony kind of pops up in the couch and he like rubs the back of his neck and he's like, oh, man, something just touched me. And then he kind of jolted and obviously like saw something. And he starts describing what he saw. And Christian, who was like on the other end of the couch, sitting in a chair, had a little bit different vantage point. He was sitting more where he would have seen behind the couch. They both confirmed that they saw something really small and dark shoot out from behind the couch that Tony was sitting in, and it darted behind the chair that I was sitting in. And, you know, so that was weird. I mean, now we're seeing little dark shadow figure type things, basically by the description of them from Christian and Tony. And, you know, I'm sitting in a chair. There's a little table between me, and then there's another chair, and Joel is sitting in that one. And at one point, I kind of mentioned, I said, you know, Justin and I had been talking about it, and I said it was kind of like a little bit of a come to Jesus meeting. And I said, we both kind of feel like, you know, maybe you got something that's kind of still hanging around from the time that you were delving into this stuff, you know, when you were trying to get your music career off the ground. And in a real matter of fact way, and almost in a defiant way, he's like, yeah, I know it. I know there's still something around. He says, it's not attached to me, but it's there. And I just thought that was an odd response to that. Not like, oh, holy shit. No, I didn't. No. You know, I mean, it was basically just admitted that it was. And, you know, so, I mean, the night kind of petered out, and there was a hot tub and a pool outside the Airbnb. So we all went and sat in the hot tub for a while before we went to bed. Next morning we got up, everything was good. I was like, hey, let's go get breakfast. I said, I'll buy. So I took the guys to Cracker Barrel. We had breakfast. We were waiting on Tony to get ready to record with us. And I was like, one of the other guys drove, and I was sitting in the back seat, and, you know, it was like mid-70s. It was sunny day. I was in shorts and a t-shirt, probably too cool for the morning, but as the day started, I was okay. But in the back seat of this car, man, I was hot. I was like, and I reached over to roll down the window, and the power button on the window was not working. And he's like, oh man, I'm sorry, my window doesn't work. And I was like, that's all right. It's not going to be that far. So we get to Cracker Barrel, we eat, had a nice breakfast, a lot of fun chit chatting. And then we got back into the car and we went back to the Airbnb. Tony still wasn't ready. We got all of our stuff. Tony calls, says, meet me at the studio at noon. And then Joel decides to drive instead. So I sit in the front seat of his car and I go to roll down his window, and his window won't roll down. And I'm burning up, and I'm overheated. I'm burning up. And he said, like, I'll turn on the air conditioner for you. So he turned on, and we drove through town, kind of took our time waiting on Tony. And then we get to Tony's place, and Tony's like, hey, I'm really hungry. I want to take you to some place, a cool place called Legends of Lore. It's a pizza place. Um, it's like 15 minutes down the road. And he looks at me and he goes, you can ride with me. And I was like, all right, cool. So, 15 minutes down the road in Tennessee is more like 40 minutes down the road in South Bend. So, because it took way longer than 15 minutes to get there. But it was really nice because I got to sit in it was just me and Tony in his truck. And, we were talking, he was asking me questions and we were talking, and it was not like Tony's way up here and I'm way down here. He was talking to me like I was a peer. And so we get to the pizza place. We have a really nice pizza. He buys us all lunch, and we drive back. I rode back with him again. We get to the studio, and we walked in, and he says, man, it's really freaking hot in here. And I'm like, dude, I am freaking dying. I'm melting away here. So he walks down the hallway and he turns the air conditioner up, and he says he's going to go do his recording with the Cryptids of the Corn guys. And Joel and I are going to wait before we do our big 4-hour, group setting. And so I sit down on the floor up against the wall in the lobby of Tony's studio. And I get a text message that says, hey, hun, I'm just checking in on you. If you're too hot, I can back off your little bit. I don't want to do it because I feel like he's right by you. Now, that text message came from JJ Rose. How in the freak she recognized that I was too hot? Because apparently she agreed to, she calls it bubbling. She agreed, she wanted to bubble me on this trip because she felt that there was something negative that might interfere with me. So I did not know that the result of being bubbled was becoming overheated. But when she sent me that text, it really kind of solidified for me that, this whole time I'm like completely overheated. The temperature outside really didn't warrant it. The clothing I was wearing I should have been really comfortable. And then she sends the number 222. And I was like, I don't know what that means. You got to be more specific. And she says, I have no idea, but it's going to become relevant. So keep your eye open for it. So I was like, okay. And it became more relevant at about 2:30 in the morning after we had done this long 4.5-hour recording. We all sat there and tried to decipher the events of the trip of my coming down there. And we realized that Joel had been at that same exit with the cloud at 2:00 in the afternoon, and that the Cryptids of the Corn guys got there at 4:00 in the afternoon, and that I had gotten to that position at 6:00 in the evening. So there was 2 hours, 2 hours, and 2 hours, which, the relevance of it. Am I reading things into it? I guess you could say that. But it was at that point where we all realized that we had been 2 hours apart from each other. Each one of us just sat up and looked at each other like, that's weird. And then I said, because when I got that 222 text message, I had said to Joel, I said, you need to see this, because if this becomes relevant at some point tonight, I want somebody else to know that this was here. And he's like, sure enough, man, she sent that text that 222. And that, that whole thing during the recording process, Joel, and it's weird because I talked to some of the other guys that were there, and I felt like I felt like there was a difference in the way Joel was responding to me during that interview, during that whole conversation. I felt like things were being directed at me. And this isn't to talk bad about him or throw shade at him at all, because I don't mean it to be that way. But I was getting a very personal sense that whatever was acting on that group of people in that room that day did not want to hear what I had to say, because my questions were more of, I wanted to figure out what was causing these interferences. Was it a good spirit that was trying to draw attention by doing this interference so people would listen to what he's saying because it's true? Was it a good spirit that was trying to draw attention to the stuff that he was saying because he was off base on it? Was it a negative energy that was trying to create a wow factor for people to pay attention to it because they didn't want what he was saying to be brought out? Or was it a negative energy that was saying, yeah, pay attention to what he's saying because it's misleading you, because we're over here doing our shit over here and you're listening to this guy saying it's over here? Those were the questions that I wanted to get at. And, unfortunately, I don't think we didn't ever get to that. But at one point, I was asking those questions, and Joel seemed to be getting a little perturbed with me. And again, this incredible psychic gift that she has, she sends me a text message and says, what the hell is going on there? I feel like this thing is just sitting there spitting and hissing at me. And she's like, it's really getting angry. And it was all happening at the same time that he was being very belligerent with me during the conversation. And at one point I got frustrated. I pushed the microphone away from me. I kind of folded my arms up, and I was kind of like done. I was like, every time I went to say something, I just felt like I was being pushed off for whatever reason. And I don't know if it was just an energy in the room, or if I don't know that it was, I'm not saying that it was anybody's agenda or anything like that. All those guys in that room, I love them. They're great guys. But I had to excuse myself. I just kind of basically muted my mic, and I went and left the room to take a leak. And I'm standing there in front of the urinal, and my phone goes off, and it's her again. And she's like, what the hell happened? Why is the vibe different? And I was like, because I left the room, I'm in the bathroom taking a leak. And she's like, oh, that explains it. And it's like, if somebody would have had a camera on me, that's the only way she would have been able to know the differences that were happening while this was going on. And then I get this, I drive back home. How long do you think it takes me to get home on Sunday? 8 hours and 12 minutes.
What it should have took for you to get down there.
What it should have took. So, after that's all over and done with, I spent weeks trying to figure out where the hell this time went. And I was always thinking that I thought the cloud was the beginning of the weirdness. And it wasn't. From the water tower to the Buc-ee's should have taken me 37 minutes by GPS. It took me 40. From Buc-ee's to the Airbnb took me exactly the amount of time that it should have taken me. From that part, everything was square. What happened from me leaving the house to getting to exit 75. So that cloud that I saw was the end of something rather than the beginning of it.
Strange.
And when I look at that, something was keeping me from getting to the Airbnb when the lights were off. I don't know what the significance of that is, but after Tony and Christian saw that dark entity scoot across the floor and go from behind the couch to behind my chair, there's something that tells me that there was going to be that it was going to hop. It was going to come after me. And for whatever reason and whatever way by me not being there when I should have been, it kept that from happening. And I don't understand it, but I've played it out a bunch of different ways and everything else makes sense. So whatever slowed my progress down happened from the time I left the house till the time I got to Lexington. And honestly, I think that was spirit in the good sense, acting on my behalf to keep something from jumping to me.
That's, man, I got so many questions. Did the symbol, the triple yin yang sign, did you look that up to see if there was any significance to that?
I tried looking that up so many times, and then all of a sudden, during the course of watching the national news, at one point there was a summit that was going to take place on top of Mount Sinai with world leaders and the Pope, and I'm trying to find it here. It was the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development. And I will copy that and I will send it to you guys on Instagram.
Okay.
Awesome.
So you
I was
can
going to
see
say,
it.
I feel like I've seen that image somewhere before. Now that I got a real clear picture of you describing it.
That's what I just sent you is the closest representation of that. But what I thought was really strange was, that it had world religious leaders that were all going to be in attendance. And I don't know if it has anything to do with it or not. But that is like the most accurate representation of the three things that cloud turned into.
That's crazy, man.
Did any of the other guys experience any missing time
Nope.
that you know of? No.
Nope.
Just you.
Not at all. And the other interesting thing is that nobody ever noticed what I felt was like aggressive banter between me and Joel. Nobody else got that. Everybody else was like, what are you talking about? They didn't get it at all.
That's weird.
It's almost like whatever he's got following, not attached, but following him, knew that you had some sort of spiritual protection as well.
Yeah.
And kind of took that as a big threat, is what it sounds like.
The whole thing is, how and this is gonna lead in a couple of weird places, because the whole spiritual protection that I have, when I first got into contact with JJ Rose, she had a very small, I think it was under 15 followers on YouTube. All she does is just post verbal, like, self-help tools as far as, bubbling yourself and how to keep positive energy around you, how to dispel negative energy, stuff like that. Just like personal grooming habits for having a good, strong spiritual armament. And when I asked her to be on the show, I said, I want to do a show about spiritual fortification and armament. How can we equip ourselves to combat negative things, not just negative energies, but, negative people and energy suckers and energy vampires, whatever you want to call them. How can we, so that's what we did our episode about. And that's how we developed our friendship is, after 10 minutes of talking to her on the phone, I felt like I'd known her my entire life. So, with her ability to help protect me on top of the spiritual fortification that I felt I already had, I think that's why I came out of that whole situation clean. But then I have somebody reach out to me after hearing the Nephilim portal babies thing, and we'll call this person Dude. Because
Eric,
Dude,
real quick, before you get too far carried ahead.
yeah,
I did have one question.
yeah,
You were talking about the shadow entity that was seen moving from behind Tony
yeah,
into where your chair was. You said, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You said it was a small entity, correct?
yes, yep.
Here's
Short, like below the back of a couch level.
Okay. Here is some very odd synchronicity, my friend.
Okay.
This weekend we recorded 2 episodes, right? And because that's just how we kind of were forced to do it. I'm not kidding you. The first episode, which aired yesterday, involved a man having contact with what he called that? Because there's 2 different names. Oh man, I cannot remember what he called it. He called it like a little elf off Harry Potter or something. Can't remember the exact phrase. Yes, Dobby. That's it. That's it.
I listened to it. Yeah.
Okay. So there's that. The very next episode we record right afterwards. Steve randomly pulls an email, pulls it up for the listener experience, which this will air next Monday for us, but for everybody else, it'll be the past Monday. And the submission is literally on what the woman can describe as shadow imp. Little shadow creature throwing a temper tantrum in the house, all over a TV being off. So I just thought that was very weird that here we are today.
Yeah.
This will literally be 3 for 3 episodes involving what I like to call now a shadow imp.
Yeah. That's a good name. I like it. I hope it sticks.
Yes, that is, and that credit goes to Autumn from our Discord. I think that she's the one that called it a shadow imp, and I'm like, I freaking love that name.
Yeah, that's badass. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So through all of this, I get a listener that reaches out to me who references first listening to the 4.5 hour ultra freaking marathon that was the Nephilim portal babies, and says some really nice things about the episode, says some really nice things about, listening to my show, how I seem to be one of the lesser few that really seem to care about the people that are on their shows. And, if there's a chance for you to help them, that you help point them in the right direction, and that you're not condescending, and that you're not ambushing them, or, just basically using them as fodder for your listens, and then never have anything to do with them again. And I've that's one of the hugest things about having done this show is I have developed so many incredible relationships with people. I absolutely did not expect this when I started doing this show, and it is by far become the best part of doing this, is because there are some fucking great people out there. There really are.
Agreed.
I love that aspect of doing this. And as long as I have enough time in the day to talk to each and every one of them, I will continue to do it until I don't have a voice left. But dude gets a hold of me, and I'm going to refer to dude as dude, because dude does not want any of this coming back on him. And there's, I guess there's good reason for it. Let's just leave it at that. So dude, is blowing some sunshine up my ass about, how nice the show is, and you know, basically makes the statement that um that dude feels that I'm brought into this because of my voice. And I wasn't quite sure what dude meant by that, but dude goes on to say, your voice in two senses. One, the literal sense that your voice brings, um, you know, rather than being uncomfortable, it makes people feel very comfortable and draws them in, and gives people a reason to listen to you. And then your voice, as far as being a platform to let people come on and tell their experiences so other people can hear and draw from their experiences what they need to. So both in the literal and the figurative sense of having a voice. And I was like, wow, that's pretty damn profound, and I never looked at it that way, but I have had a lot of people comment on my voice. It's just, it's one of those things. I mean, and even at the beginning of the show, there's no ego involved with this. I never even introduced myself as Erick Szilagyi. That hasn't happened until, like, the last 6 months or so. I always introduce myself as I'm your host. And this is uncomfortable. It wasn't about me. I'm not an important aspect of the show. I'm just facilitating getting your message out to other people that might help. But dude starts telling me about, basically asked me if I've ever listened to Holosky. and I said, I'll be honest with you. I said, I've heard the name for quite a while because you guys were getting big. And I said, but I've only listened to a couple of episodes. One of them was the binary code, because I thought that was really interesting. And like I told you, I was really big into the UFO stuff. So the whole Rendlesham Forest incident where the guy touched the UFO and he had a download of binary code. So that was a really interesting one. And then from whatever way I found out about it, I started hearing about the Egress Industries. And I had gone back and I'd listened to your episodes on it. And then I'd found another episode. I think it was still on your show, but it was another guy who was getting phone calls from Egress to his. And dude says, I've got some information that I think maybe you should get to these guys. And I'm like, well, here's the really weird thing, because I just, like, in the last 2 weeks, got a review left for me on Apple Podcasts, and it was a wonderful review. Said that they were introduced to me by somebody down at a Dogman conference, and they've been listening to the show. They like it, and we need to do a collab soon. And I said, it was signed Holosky. I said, so it's really kind of weird that out of all the things that you could be talking to me about, you'd bring up Holosky. And now you've got information that you want me to give to Holosky. And dude says that dude had, like, tried to contact you guys through multiple platforms, email, Instagram, and I think even through Patreon. That, like, I think in total 17 different attempts to get a hold of you, to get you information. And none of them ever got a reply. So dude was like, I don't know what the F is going on. Either they're ignoring me, or they think I'm crazy, or, they're just not interested, or, this is all, they're not taking it seriously. I don't even know. So we start having a conversation, and dude says it can basically clear up for you the question of whether or not Egress has got something to do with the 3-letter agency. And I said, all right, those, that's pretty strong words. I mean, what have we got here? So dude suggests that that you and myself watch a documentary called Third Eye Spies. And when I started watching it, it had dawned on me that I had already seen it before, at some point, probably within the last year. But I watched it again just to kind of get a refresher on everything that was going on. And dude says that there's a number of things in there that are relative to pointing you in the direction of, not necessarily exactly at, but kind of a parallel to where Egress is stemming from. And so dude says he has an experience with actually calling the Happy Valley number. And the conversation is had, ends up calling the Happy Valley number and talks about a specific dream. It gets called back. Well, dude has some relation to some 3-letter agencies and can call on those relations to confirm some things. So when dude gets a call back from Egress, the area code doesn't make sense. Dude says that they're not from the area of the Happy Valley flyer that they called the number to. And dude's asked, well, are you open to us broadcasting directly to you? And dude's like, yeah, fuck it. Let's do it. So over the course of a few days, dude has some really weird dreams. In both dreams, the people are dressed in like white, almost like hazmat suits, only there's no hoods. They're just like white body suits that are kind of not very form fitting. Recognizes that in each of the dreams, there doesn't seem to be the use of electricity anywhere. There's no lights on. There's no nothing that looks like it's being run electrically. Almost at first thought it was like some kind of like a post-apocalyptic something or other. Said some people in the dream seem to be completely unaware of dude's presence, and other people in the dream seem to be very aware of dude's presence. Dude has the presence of mind to ask relations with the three-letter agencies to take a look at the phone number that was calling, and come to find out, even though the area code was nowhere near where dude was, dude says basically they can tell you the store that the cell phone was bought in. That's how deep their dive can go.
Damn.
Dude says they get the information back on the number, and the information on the number is registered to a property that is less than 2 blocks away from dude's house. And when you look at that property that it's registered to, it is an open lot. There is no house there. There is no building there. It is an open lot. Now, dude says, look up Egress Industries. Google it. So I did. I can't find anything. Dude says, I'm looking at it right now. And I'm like, what do you mean you're looking at it right now? Dude says, when this all first started happening, he Googled it, and it came up as a software communications that specialized in decrypted communications, but was specific only to the US, UK, and Australian governments as clients. Dude tells me exactly what to Google to get this to pull up. And it pulls up. Dude's reading what is on dude's screen, and it's not matching with what's on my screen at all. We're both on iPhones. We both Googled the same exact capitalizations and lowercase and spaces, exactly the same. Dude's looking at something entirely different than I am. Then dude tells me, let's try this. I also put it into the Wayback Machine. You guys familiar with the Wayback Machine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So dude says, go here, do this, put in that, click on this date, this screenshot, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't come up for me. No responses. Dude's like, I'm looking at it right now. And I'm like, I'm pretty good with computer stuff. I'm not an idiot. And I'm not getting anything that is even close to representing what dude's looking at on dude's screen, which is weird, right?
Very weird.
Yeah.
Why would dude be able to see things that I can't?
Yeah, that's my number one question right now.
Then dude says, now the website for Egress Industries is completely different than what it was when dude looked at it the first time. And that those indications of only being governmental communication decryption stuff is not there anymore. So the website has changed.
How does it change so fast?
I don't know. See, here's this, how I got roped into all this is beyond me, because I'd listened to maybe 5 of your podcasts in total. And that's no disrespect or
No.
You know,
we know how it is.
Yeah.
There's times where I just can't listen.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I just got to step away from it. I'm doing it on my own. And, you know, there's times where I'm like, I don't want to listen to other podcasts because I don't want to start adopting the same way, the same style as somebody else. I don't want to start, trying to, unconsciously start doing the same format. But then there's other times where it's like, I love podcasts, so I got to listen, but it seems really fucking weird to me that of the 4 or 5 that I have listened to you, 3 of them have been about Egress.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, as far as the Egress story goes, when I first heard it was very similar. The visceral experience of hearing that that audio was very similar to the same feeling that I got from watching Hellier, the documentary from, you know, and what I mean by that is that Hellier hooked me, man. It hooked me hard and it sucked me in. I could not wait for the next episode. But I was always kind of like, if this is just a story that somebody wrote, man, they should get every freaking award that there is, because the way they wove the story together and the little things that didn't seem like they meant anything end up meaning a shit ton, a lot, you know. It was just, and that was the same feeling when I listened to that whole Egress story. I was like, man, I was freaking hooked. But that's all I ever listened to, you know. And then I caught that one other episode. You had some guy on who had calls coming to his, I don't even remember what his name was, Mark or Mike or something like that, maybe. And, you know, I mean, you guys, I knew who you were as far as being on my radar, but you were not on my radar as far as, you know, are we going to collaborate, you know? And then all of a sudden I get a review from you guys, and then dude pops up. Dude pops up after hearing the Nephilim Portal Babies Swapcast thing, and is like, you know, all about telling me like almost immediately, you know, after, you know, blowing a little bit of sunshine up my ass, starts telling me about the experience with Egress.
Yeah, we had a listener at the Dogman conference, as you mentioned before, come up to us and like, hey, I love the show, you know, which is, I mean, we didn't have any indicators that we were who we were to begin with, but this guy recognized us right off the rip, and probably not 5 minutes into the conversation, he's like, you need to check out this podcast. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm always open to suggestions. And he pops it up and he's like, it'll be right up your alley. It'll be right up your alley. I'm like, so I bookmarked it on my phone.
Yeah.
And went about my business, you know, whatever. I'm driving to work one day, I flip on one of your shows, I'm supposed to do it. I'm like, all right, cool. I dig what this dude's doing. So I just pop on and I leave your review. I'm like, hey, we should hook up at some time, you know, and
yeah,
collaborate. And then sure enough, it was almost it's almost okay. There's when you get me started on Egress,
I know exactly where you're going, because
it's a whole different,
my mind's at.
It's a whole different beast here. All right. So, first thing that I want to touch on is that we were the flyers that were Happy Valley and the flyer that is Egress are two different flyers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Egress was in Austin, and I even asked Egress if they were connected to Happy Valley, and they said no.
Right.
So up to this point, I had always I don't know why the fuck I did, but I always trusted as to what they were saying as to be the truth. I was in the camp that like they hadn't given me a reason not to believe what they were saying.
Yeah.
And I had always kept those two things completely separate. But the other episode you're talking about, where we interviewed the podcaster, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had a run-in with Happy Valley prior to ever getting involved with Egress.
Oh.
So he had been followed, he says, by this Happy Valley crew, and like heavy deep shit. And then after that, Egress kind of comes into place. And
yeah.
to wrap this around, was that we didn't know that this other podcaster was doing anything on any of these flyers or anything until out of nowhere somebody on Reddit sends me a message on the Holosky page, and at the same time somebody sends him a message on his podcast Reddit page that link us together. And then on that note, once we circled back around and got to looking into it, it was almost like whatever this thing is was almost pitting us against this other podcaster, like a loyalty test.
Yeah.
They wanted, we didn't even bring this out. We didn't make this known at all because at the time, like we're small fish, right?
Right.
And the last thing we need to do is start butting heads with other people in the community. And they wanted us to go on and essentially call him out, call him a liar, call him this,
Yeah.
that, and the other, put a show out, just throwing shade. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're not about that life, right?
Right.
That's not what we're into. And it was almost like that was a test of loyalty to them as to how far they could manipulate us. And when we were like, no, then it's like almost all the information just dried up. Just
Yeah.
just got sucked out of the air. It was the number that you would call it had a voicemail that would pick up, and it's this weird, I'm sure you've heard it, but it changed over time.
Yeah.
Certain words changed, like, man, I can't remember. Something was changed to agents, like instead of just if you it changed from operators to agents, which was fucking weird. That was the only thing that changed, which was strange. And now the number's completely gone. It's a totally different uh it goes to somebody else's Google Voice or
Yeah.
VoIP number. And then like we had all this going on. We were getting pulled in so many different directions. We just didn't know where to go and what like I said before, that at one point the only person I could trust was Kyle.
Yeah.
Because so many different people
Right.
we were getting coordinates to Somerset, Kentucky, and then the actual Egress number has a area code in Tennessee, but it's found on a single solitary flyer in a subdivision in Austin, and it's just all this. Then we had numbers from Washington D.C. calling us and texting us. We had all these weird profiles on Twitter that were messaging us with all this cryptic bullshit, and it was just we couldn't catch ourselves coming or going.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have any idea. And the whole time, like, I'm using my burner phone to contact this thing because I don't want it to know who the fuck I am. And then it starts referring to me by my name. And I'm like, well, why the fuck did I buy this burner phone? Because they already know who I am.
Yeah.
And like I said, at that time, our podcast reach was not anything.
No.
In 2020, especially in the beginning of 2020, no reach, like hardly at all. Like people, our friends and family listened to the show, and that was like it. So the fact that they were tuned in, like it didn't make any sense that they would know who we are.
Yeah.
And how we got roped into it. I like that flyer was not put there for us.
Right.
I'm 100% on board with that. That flyer was put there for one specific person in that subdivision. I don't know what the outcome or what the purpose is, but it was put there for somebody that wasn't us. I just managed to stumble on it on some stupid fucking Reddit post. And I'm like, oh, that'll make good internet. Let me call it. And then it just opened this whole can of worms.
Well, Dude and I had a conversation about, what would be the purpose for this? What's the potential end game of being able to broadcast to somebody in their dream? So we've had several conversations about this, and it goes fucking deep. Dude's dad was a spook for the company. Dude's godfather was a head of the FBI during the time that Patty Hearst was found and liberated from her captors. And again, if you go and you watch Third Eye Spies, you'll see that the use of remote viewers, fucking remote viewers, were what found Patty Hearst. Psychic remote viewers And remote viewing is nothing new to the United States military and government. They've been using it for years, and it was backed by millions of dollars during the late 60s and into the, I think, even early 90s, when they said that they disbanded the whole operation. But we all know that, it just moves. They say they close something down, it just moves to the next door, the next office, and then they take back up, and they use it for their but so we talk about, like, what would be, what could you do if you could accurately broadcast to somebody in their sleep? And I, okay, say, and these broadcasts seem to be regional, right? They're hitting regional areas to find out if people are having weird dreams. And if they call that number and they tell them about their dreams, in dude's case, they call back and they say, hey, are you open to, because dude called the Happy Valley thing, and dude didn't live anywhere near Happy Valley. And they said, would you be open to us broadcasting directly to you?
Yeah, that's fucked up.
And then within 2 weeks, flyers start showing up in dude's hometown.
See, another thing is the original Egress flyer didn't mention dreams. It didn't mention dreams at all. I pulled it up here. I got saved to my phone. I'll read it again. It says, strange, see something, say something. If you remember things differently from how it was, have ever found repeating numbers or words, have ever experienced deja vu or miracles, know the existence of any greater entity, have good, bad, or any luck of any kind, hear voices that will never be real, see things that should not be, have a distrust of mirrors, or are drawn to caverns, please contact, and it's the number. So when I asked them, I'm like, are you in any way connected to the dream flyers? They said, we are not connected to the dream flyers. So at that point, I kind of just took it for what it was, that they were not connected. Since looking back, they didn't really mention anything about dreams, but they did mention all this other weird phenomenon.
Yeah. So, dude and I have conversations. It's like, what could you accomplish if you could broadcast and essentially plant thoughts or visions or agendas? Or so if you get a number of people that are willing participants, and you go through and you weed out the ones that are not giving you the feedback that is accurate. You're weeding out the people that are just calling up saying, oh, I had a dream about this. Was that your broadcast? And they're like, fuck no, that wasn't the broadcast. But then you do get the people that do. Then now you have a selected target, right? You've got a group of people collectively throughout the country that you can target with specific things. And so what if Oregon, what if Portland area, because that's where the Happy Valley was, right? Portland?
Yes.
Okay. What if you get a bunch of people that respond to that flyer, and you find 8 or 10, maybe 12 people who are responding to your dreams with giving you information that lets you know that they are accurately receiving your broadcast? Could you then implant the idea into a number of people to, say, decide to organize and overthrow a local city government, like what they did in Portland? Could you create basically psychic assassins who, with a trigger word or a certain phrase, something very much akin to what people, MK Ultra mind control type stuff, Maybe this is a big brother to that program.
Man, I don't know.
Manchurian candidates.
Yeah. I just looked
people
at
that
back.
are people that are experiencing training in their brain that they don't even know they're going through to be called upon at what through a broadcast. We have a number of different things in our homes that broadcast to us daily. You can get a broadcast through your telephone, you can get broadcast through your computer, you can get a broadcast through your television set. You don't even need to be connected to the internet or have cable. All you have to do is have an antenna. That's how television was broadcast for years and years. That's how radio stations that's how you listen to music in your house, over an antenna from a radio wave that's broadcasted. If they've developed a way to get that information to your brain without having to go through, I mean, the implications of being able to do something like that are staggering. Could you induce enough people in each state to just become so scared of your government that you would never even think about rising up against some atrocities that may start to happen? Could you control law enforcement to go and start doing things that were just completely like kneeling down on somebody's throat and killing them in the street while people were filming it so that it would get a broadcast across the televisions and create divisiveness between us that is already there, just making it more and more to keep us at each other? Because if we're all at each other, their job is freaking easy, man.
Yep.
So hopefully I've given you enough background with what dude said that dude's dive into this was a little bit more than what I think the average person would be capable of doing.
Yeah. And then I also wondered, when we were putting out the episodes and we were going on the shows, we're essentially playing the voicemail over and over and over. And we played it on Tony's show, who is infinitely bigger than we are. So it got broadcast to thousands and thousands of people. Then we played it on Tinfoil Hat, same Tripoli show, which was even bigger than that. And it played out to thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is it some, like, did we fuck up playing that for everybody? Was that kind of an end goal? Is that why they changed the voicemail? Maybe once it started picking up steam, did they put something in that second voicemail that we're starting to play all over the place? And once it hit like its peak maximum as to however many people they wanted it to fell on, then they just pulled the voicemail. I don't know, man. Now I'm like circling back around on these other flyers, because in my head I had them separate, and now I'm wondering if they're all tied together again.
Well, realistically, if you looked at them like that, one of them could have been phase 1. Egress could have been phase 2.
I just pulled them up. The one from Portland was the Willamette Valley Dream Survey from 2015. Happy Valley was in Utah, where they started finding the flyers.
That's right. Yeah.
In 2020. And
that's what dude said. It was Utah. Yeah.
And Egress was 2019 in Austin.
They used a lot of the same communication too, because I vaguely had conversation with dude, and I was given images of conversations, and I'm like, man, some of the language here is relatively similar to the language used with Egress, because Egress had a very particular verbiage that they would use.
Yeah.
And that initially was what struck us odd. We're like, man, they're choosing very specific words that normal people in everyday conversation don't use those words. And it's not in today's world.
It's interesting that dude keeps using, like, and the correlation between Happy Valley, you keep using the term broadcast.
Yeah.
Because that was the same word that stuck out when Egress was talking to us. When I asked him, I'm like, are you guys fucking with us? And they're like, no, we haven't sent anybody to sit in on your broadcast or something like that. Man,
it's like yet. We haven't sent anybody yet. And they said, don't trust anybody who you don't see a badge.
Yeah, they did tell us that, because I'm like, how do we know who's official? And they said if it doesn't come directly from this number, the only other way to know that they are part of what Egress is if they show you a badge. So I don't know.
It's forever a big mystery, man. And I know specifically there'll be at least one person that doesn't like this conversation, but because some people get tired of hearing it. And for me, it's kind of comical, because how are you going to get to the bottom of things if you don't continue to go forward?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And the only reason why this is coming up is because you bring it up to us. You know, you were given information to forward on to us.
Yeah.
And
we have to chase.
It's what we do. I mean, it's what we do.
Egress could message my phone right now and give me an address, and I would head there this weekend. Plain and simple.
It's weird, man. It's weird. And like, I don't know if this could be significant to dude. And dude might have listened to the way I described things, maybe not. But I've told several people. I even had off the air conversation. Me and Steve got to sit down with Charlie from Tony's show, and I'm like, man, I'm telling you right now, like, when we were dealing with all this stuff, we felt, I did. I don't know if Steve did or not, but I felt connected to something. Like it was this weird internal connection. And once it got pulled out from underneath us and started to dissipate, I could literally feel that connection fading. And I even ended up texting Egress, and I asked him, I said, why, when we were in conversation with one another, did I feel connected to something? And they never responded. It was after they pulled the plug with us and would just refuse to talk. But I threw it out there. I'm like, fuck it, I'm just going to ask them. And they never did end up responding. But I don't know. It was bizarre. It was super bizarre.
There was a while I was messaging them every day, trying to get a response. Just throwing anything to the wall that would stick. And after like what I call the loyalty test, and I think they realized that they weren't manipulating us as much as they thought they could. They just lost interest.
It's possible. I mean, you know, if you don't get the desired results you want from a lab, and you dump, you know, tens of thousands of dollars into this lab to come up with some substantial results, and you give a certain amount of time, they don't get the results they were looking for, and they pull your funding and
move on
to the next thing.
Because they said there were stages. There were stages that you moved on to, and if you moved to the next phase, you would know. And I was trying to dig into that. How do I know if we move to the next phase? And they're like, you'll know. So there might still be trials and tribulations of Egress going on that we are not privy to anymore. I don't know. It's fucking weird.
It is weird.
So I don't know if I levied any information for you guys that was.
No, it makes me want to circle back and go through everything again. That's what it does.
And we will.
Yeah.
We will eventually.
Oh.
Carving out the time. Everybody knows how hard it is.
It's the never-ending chase.
Yeah.
Never-ending chase that is Egress Industries. Absolutely.
Well, for me, it validates the 3-letter agency. So just kind of what I've suspected for quite some time. Just never had the proof.
And I guess if I have anything else to say, trust in the dude.
I was going to say that. Yes, I
trust
will.
in the dude.
I like that.
I'll be putting a lot of faith in dude, and it's much appreciated. Like, it's not. I mean, you know how it is.
Yeah, we don't take that lightly.
No, you walk this. We as these voices, as you so say, we walk these lines now. You know, we walk these lines, and we dig around in places we're probably not supposed to, and every single freaking ally that you can muster along the way is greatly appreciated.
Yeah,
that's
you know what I mean. And
no
we
doubt.
all have. It's cool to have guys like you in our camp that we can sit here and, even if it's just brainstorming, hanging out, brainstorming or something. I mean, sometimes you need that outside perspective on things.
Yeah,
you know,
you get answers is ask a bunch of different questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are not that far from me. Is that correct?
Where are you at?
South Bend, Indiana.
Oh no, not at all.
No, we're pretty close. We're on the the western side of Illinois, just north of St. Louis.
Yeah.
So not too long of a hop, skip, and a jump.
No,
maybe we'll have to put together an in studio at some point.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be sick.
That would be awesome
for sure.
Well, man, if you wanna tell everybody again where we can find you.
One more time. All right. Uncomfortable Podcast. Uncomfortable Podcast. There's several Uncomfortables out there with varying different. So the best thing, if you search on any of your podcast listening apps, Uncomfortable Erick, ERICK, that'll pull it right up. It's black and white logo with a lowercase U and an uppercase N. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65. I'm on everything, Spotify, Apple, every caster you can think of. So just having a ball doing this, and love meeting people like you guys, and
awesome
fostering new relationships and new friendships, and just treating everybody right. That's the main goal, and I don't plan on changing anytime soon. So
good.
Hell yeah.
Good.
All right, Hollow Cult, if that's your call, roll over and show the Uncomfortable Pod some love.
Please.
Appreciate that.
And I've been linking it on Facebook and Twitter. If you guys want to get on there, I've been tagging them. That's where you go to find it. There, we can put your links in the show notes as well. So, all right, check us out at all our socials. Like I said before, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, and Discord. So until we meet again, Hollow Cult and Uncomfortable listeners, stay safe out there, stay weird, and trust in the dude.
Trust in the dude.